So what is the human soul? How can we compare it? How can we get at what it is? I'm going to say that the soul is a substantial form, and then I'm going to argue that therefore humans are not just collections of atoms, and that humans are not just two things, a body and a soul somehow glued together. I'm going to argue rather that each human is one reality with the dignity of a human person. But if I'm going to argue all of that, I first have to tell you something about what is a substantial form, and that might seem like a rather mysterious concept. So we'll begin with something ordinary. I'll ask you to imagine again something like, say, a popsicle stick. Generally, when you find them in the popsicle, they're straight. They work better that way. But you can bend them, and if you bent your popsicle stick, it would now be bent, not straight, but it would still be the wooden popsicle stick. In every change, there's something that stays the same and something new. You could change the popsicle stick in a more radical way, though, if you took a match to it and burned the wood. Then it would no longer be wood, but ashes. It wouldn't be the same thing. What stays the same in that case? Well, if it's the thing that's changing, it can't be the thing that stays the same. It can't be the being itself that stays the same. Aristotle answers that what stays the same in those changes is the mere possibility of being, the possibility of being a thing, the possibility of being something, and he calls that possibility primary matter. It can be a confusing term because we think of matter as something. You can have a wheelbarrow full of matter, but this primary matter is not a thing. It's simply the principle of the possibility of being a thing. The principle that actualizes that possibility of being, so that it exists first as wood and then as ashes, is called substantial form. That by which a thing is what it is. Every material thing that you come across is composed of substantial form and primary matter. It is what it is because of its substantial form. So the wood is wood because it has a substantial form of wood, and it can become something else because its possibility of being is open to many other forms, so it can become ashes. Now in living things, the substantial form is called the soul. So a dog, say, is substantial form and primary matter, or soul and primary matter. Its substantial form, or its soul, is not the entire dog, it's only part of the dog, one principle. Now the dog certainly has carbon atoms, neutrons, and so on, many different particles that make it up. But in the dog, those things exist not simply as carbon atoms and so on, they exist as dog in virtue of the substantial form. So the dog is a dog from its nose to its tail. It's not just carbon atoms that we call a dog. It is a dog because all of those different parts are existing now as dog because of its substantial form that's actualizing possibility of being to make it one thing, the dog. The human being is also composed of substantial form and primary matter. The substantial form is called the soul. So the substantial form or the soul of a human being is not the whole human being. It's only part of the human being. Sometimes we might be tempted to think that the soul is the real me and the body is just an appendage. But just like the dog is not simply its substantial form, so the human being is not simply its substantial form. The whole human being involves both substantial form and primary matter, and the soul, substantial form, is only part. And human beings likewise have carbon atoms and neutrons and protons and so on. But in the human being, they exist as human in virtue of its substantial form or soul. So the human is human from head to toe. The soul, substantial form, accounts for the structure and the activities of a substance. So the dog has a tail and barks because of its substantial form as dog, and the human being has an opposable thumb and an ability to think because it has the substantial form or soul of human being. So in some ways, we can't say that the human being is composed of body and soul, though we often hear that, because, as if the body were one thing and the soul were another thing, because the body wouldn't be a human body with an opposable thumb unless it possessed and were actualized by the human substantial form, the soul. We can say that the human is composed of primary matter and substantial form, or primary matter and soul. And the human being is one being with the dignity of a human person. We can also affirm, if we want to go through philosophical argumentation or simply look to revelation, that the human soul is immortal and that the whole human being is destined towards immortality beyond death. But Aquinas would argue, and does argue, that the human soul by itself is not the whole human person. And so we look forward to the resurrection of the body in looking forward to the fullness of our eternal life with God.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Well, that
And
was
for your
easier than I thought it would be.
I think most faculty